Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Welcome to the Great Debate Season 2. We are back in the building. I'm kind of enjoying my little strapline. We're back in the building, but we're in a different building. We're at the Front Room in Croydon. It's an amazing music and art space. I want you to go online and check them out. They're doing a great work in the community and their space may just be the right place for your event. As usual, I am joined by my trusty panel of esteemed musicians and artists, starting with
Joseph Ross.
Joseph Ross.
Becky Thomas.
Wicked. And as you can see, we are aided by technology. We have Ryan. Say what's up, Ryan.
Guys, good to be here.
Wicked. Ryan's all the way in ATL. And also we are joined by two ministers. Minister Matti and Jesse. Say what's up.
Hello guys, straight from the HQ. Done now.
Lol. All right, cool. As you know, this season we've brought in guests to be on the show with us, and it's been great having guests with us because they're giving us a deeper insight and they are helping us really get to the crux of the issues. So, our first guest is a gifted lyricist with an ill flow. Sorry, I need to do that. He's a Mobo award-winning rapper. He's released an EP this year. It's Triple O.
Yo, it's really good family.
Wicked. And last but not least, our next guest is somewhat of a legend in this here UK gospel music game. He's a pioneer in the UK Christian rap scene. He was a member of the award-winning Green Jade. He also heads up Tile Yard Impact, which is a platform that gives opportunities to disadvantaged youth in the King's Cross area. Welcome, Wisdom.
What's up? Otherwise known as Triple O's dad.
Hilarious. All right, cool. So this is an interesting one, right? Because I was having a conversation and I realized we often, when we're talking about UK gospel, we end up talking very focused on like singers. We automatically go to worship music and kind of typical church music. I think naturally so, because I guess if it's gospel, it's going to start in the church, you know what I mean? But then there's this whole kind of movement of things that happen outside of the typical norm of what you would say is church music, you know what I mean? And hip hop, and I mean, now Afrobeats is really coming in, all that kind of stuff. But even with Afrobeats, I mean, that kind of, a lot of people are singing, so that even could be seen as church music, especially with its roots in high life and all that kind of stuff. So really and truly, we always end up talking about hip hop and grime and rap and all this kind of stuff. So I guess what we're going to discuss today is how do the others fit into the scenario, you know what I mean? So I think what I want to ask is, I'm just going to go straight in. Triple O, what has it been like, being a rapper in the UK gospel scene?
For me, I've loved it. I've been doing this for about 15 years now, and standing on the shoulders of individuals like Wisdom and those that were doing it before I was doing what I'm doing at the moment. And that wouldn't be possible if it wasn't, for the artists that came before me. But for me personally, having the opportunity to tour and to kind of take the music to different arenas and different venues worldwide has been absolutely incredible. I think one of the most frustrating things is the lack of funding and structure in the UK gospel scene in general, which kind of stops artists across the board from doing it full time. So in my years of doing this, thankfully, like, music has never been my main source of income. But in my years of doing this, I've seen from different genres, I've seen so many artists come and go.
Yeah.
And it's because of the lack of funding and the lack of structure that is in the UK gospel scene, period. So I've enjoyed it, and it's definitely been a journey for me. There's been highs and there's been some lows, but I champion UK gospel music which way I can.
Totally. Wiz?
Mine was a challenging journey because we were at the very, very beginnings of it. So really one of the first Christian hip hop groups, if you like, was Blessing Man and those guys, what were they called? The
The
Presents.
presents.
But we didn't come in attached to them.
Sorry, my older brother was in the presents.
Yeah, of course.
Not many people know this.
Man has the best hip-hop name of all time, Sermonator. It was amazing. Anyway, right? So, like, it was... So, for me, Green Jade were originally a gang, and then we came to Christ. But we were always a hip-hop group. So, we existed before we were of faith. So, we were around the same times as Black Twang, Ty, Mike GLC, Out the Ville, 57 Dynasty. We were actually existing in the non-Christian hip-hop world. And we were a gang of like 25 of us, and 14 of us came to Christ. So as a result of that, and that included people like Jahazel, Michelle, a few others that weren't necessarily
Full Immersion guys, yeah?
Yeah, we were all part of a crew together. So when we came to Christ and became established in our faith, it became a natural thing for us to continue making the music that we were making, because quite frankly, having come from literally going to Onyx and Wu-Tang concerts and then going to Fred Hammond concerts, it was a big jump.
It's a big jump.
There wasn't the music there for us. So we started making mixtapes that then other people started to hear just for ourselves. And we ended up not really intentionally as a gospel hip hop group. It was just that was our progression, and our audience around us were at first Christians as well as the mainstream hip hop world in the UK. So we had a lot of fighting to do, essentially, because we were too hip hop for the church, but too church for hip hop.
Hip hop, Lord.
And we had to kind of find this balance between, we genuinely were young men of faith, because we were all sort of 17 to 23 at the time, and very zealous about our faith and wanting to pass that on. But it wasn't necessarily the churches that we were in weren't particularly receptive to it at the time. And I remember even performing in our own church one time, and all the missionaries got up at one time and walked out en masse. But we kept going. And a number of the kids in that audience have gone on to be some of the best and most well-known musicians in the country. And a lot of them have come to us and said it was because you guys kept going that day that we felt the confidence to keep going, despite the fact that, and you would know as a Christian musician who works with non-Christian artists, they weren't getting a lot of love either. Yeah. We understood that kind of our position was, now God had called us, we had a talent, we had a skill, and we were supposed to stand up for it, even if those around us didn't really quite understand it, because it wasn't just for us.
Definitely. Wow. It's really interesting because you've answered some of the questions I was going to ask you, but no, it's good. It's good because it's naturally gone there, because it's what I thought it would be. I have lined up to ask you, like, what barriers did you face? Like, how did the church receive you? Like, so for instance, how different is it now? Before I come to some of the guys on the screen, how different is it now, knowing where you come from?
I feel that there's a sense of regression. I'm only to speak from...
You said regression. Oh.
And I still don't... In the sense that during the 2000s, we'd got to a point where we had a community. Funny, we're in Croydon. We did the first sort of gospel event outside of a Christian environment at Granaries, a club night that we held back in 2000. Called Rebirth, and it was the first time that anyone was really putting on Christian events in secular venues, which is just down the road from where we are here. So, and then I was the first person who scouted DJ El Nino and put him on at his first gig.
Remember El Nino?
And then
that's UB1, isn't it?
Yeah. Jeez. So what happened after that was James came to me, El Nino came to me and was like, "Oh, how'd you put on gigs?" So I helped him set up United by One, which again was down the road. He took that on and built, senior performances. We had GL Live, we had magazines, we had websites, we had all sorts of things. We had crews going like Zion Noise. You had these guys coming through, and there was this whole hive of activity that I felt like 2010, 2011. wasn't able to continue to support itself and started to fall back in on itself.
Interesting.
And we've been left with a situation where we have really only, there's a lot of artists and there's a lot of activity, but actually making those steps forward into careers, really and truthfully, it's only really been the individuals who've been supported by churches that have a bank balance and see the worth and value in those particular artists. But the scene as being, you know, as I say, I watched Triple O come up. Triple O knows me because we got involved in his scene, even though it wasn't necessarily our scene. And we were trying to do this thing where we gave back to our youngers because we knew the need for this. So it's still a little sad for me to feel like
the regression.
Yeah, there isn't the web. Where are the websites? Do you know what I mean? I know Step Forward are doing their thing, and I'm not saying that everything's falling,
of course,
bad, but we had progressed 10 years ago to a place where unfortunately we weren't able to continue on from.
Interesting. All right, so Matty and Jesse, I'm going to come to you, right? And here's the question I want to ask, because it's interesting. I have always been, what's the word? I've always been inspired, that's the word. I've always been inspired by the whole hip hop kind of scene, because I've always seen you guys as doers. And it's probably because that whole kind of other label, you've just had to do your thing. So for me, when you describe what you just described you're describing a whole infrastructure, which it seemed like you guys had your own ecosystem, which the rest of Christian, like UK gospel didn't have. And so I was going to say, Matty and Jesse, do you agree with that? Where it's like, you realize that these guys are doing something that I say we, but like UK gospel, they seem to have their own kind of ecosystem. And like, we could kind of take, I know you're saying it's regressed, but what do you think we can take from that in terms of like the UK gospel scene in kind of building like an industry?
I think I love this. I came up with like the T3M era.
Okay.
So, unless you guys remember like Dick Tizzle,
Yeah.
And I just remember the rappers doing their own thing. They just were always doing their own thing and they were progressing, and I don't know why they all stopped. I think some people went to do more of a CCM route, but I think if you're asking me how do we take positives, I think they just got to get back to doing their own thing. And there was this kind of belief around that era. I think Simply Andy was doing Bibles at the time, and there was this mad buzz with the young people. If I'm in the right phase, correct me if I'm wrong, where the rappers were just running, and there was an infrastructure, but they were just running, and there was a belief that maybe we can kind of now embed back into the industry. But I just remember there was loads of rappers at a time, and they were all just doing their own thing. They were doing shows. I remember being in Oceans doing shows with like Vic Tizzle and Tunde.
Exactly.
I remember G-Force were doing their own thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember there being massive budgets. I remember them just getting on with it. And it was just growing and growing. So if you're asking me what I think we could do, I think that belief in what they're doing has to come back. They have to believe in that genre of music and then infiltrate it again. And I think people are waiting for it, because back then when we were doing it, it was massive. And I still believe it can be massive now. I just don't quite understand why everybody stopped. So I think it's just belief, if you're asking me.
It's also that a lot of those guys were using their student loans.
That's right.
Which is the reality. People going university and using their uni loans because nobody else was coming in to support them. And it looked great, but it was unsustainable. And that was the real challenge. Because as I said, from as an older, watching those guys come up, and Vic Tizzle was still doing amazing work in the industry and stuff like that, it was because they put their money where their mouths were, but unfortunately then found that there wasn't an audience to sustain it. And unlike the situation now where actually a lot of artists are paying their bills not from the selling of CDs, but actually from corporate sponsorships and deals with influencer deals and, you know, various other income streams that at the time weren't open to people, they didn't have a further way to go forward. And that was why I said it was sad watching it, because I know how much time and effort had been put into it, and everyone felt, like you said, something happening here. There's these artists who are coming through who are on a par with what was going on in the UK. I mean, at that time, we're a 90s hip hop. We sound American because that was our era and our influence. So it didn't make sense for us to jump on a East London sounding thing because we're not. It's South London. It's inspired by Jay-Z. But like, it was great to see these guys coming through. But as I said, that the problem and the reason, from my point of view, looking into it, that the momentum stopped was there wasn't a means to sustain. Yeah. And anything that can't be sustained essentially dies.
Exactly. Ryan, I'm interested to know your kind of take on this, just in terms of some of the stuff that Wiz just said, where he was talking about, he mentioned that there wasn't an audience to sustain it. Obviously, we know structurally there's issues, but like, shed some light on me on what you think about the audience, how people were receiving it, or was it literally just there wasn't the structure to sustain it, so that made the whole ecosystem fall over, so then people weren't getting what was being put out?
Yeah, I think what happened is there was a sort of space in time in UK gospel where things were just blowing up. I mean, WB's first album came out, I think, 2008, and he had a huge event at Glory House, and Jesse was touching on the T3M concert that was done at the Indigo too. I mean, these were major music these guys were making at the time. Part of, actually, speaking of Governor B, part of his story and part of his success was having the support of his pastor. And he talks about that often. He was, I think it was, I can't remember the pastor's name, but the pastor that was at Glory House kind of was identified his talent and said, you know what, you have something, and pushed him and gave him the venue to do his concert, and really kind of gave him a platform. And I know he had help from a lot of other people like Noel Robertson and stuff. But a lot of the audience that likes that type of music, that was kind of my generation growing up, and Jesse's, and we've grown up, you know what I mean? Like, we've grown up, and as we've grown up, like, our taste in music has changed, our desires have changed, our priorities have changed, and also, like, the style of music, if you look at the music that was being made back then by a lot of these rappers, it was very similar to, it was the gospel equivalent of what was going on in grime, right? But even if you look at that space of music, the sound has changed a lot. I don't know that they really evolved with it. A lot of the stuff I hear now from a lot of gospel rappers, it sounds like stuff that they was doing 15 years ago. And it's like, well, you know, I think some of them have been able to evolve, but then you look at artists like Governor B, he realized that he'd maxed out the gospel space and made a decision to kind of sort of transfer into moving into more of the white spaces, because there was really nothing left for him to do. I mean, he'd done everything in every major stage, and in order to take what he was doing and make it a sustainable career where you can, like, buy a house and buy a mortgage and take care of your family, that wasn't it, like Wisdom was saying, it just was not sustainable. And so it's like, are we just going to settle and be happy with, you know, it being a scene and just, you know, making, you know, little money here and there, or are we actually trying to make or give platforms for people to make careers out of this? Because that really changes the conversation, you know. So yeah, that's kind of where
interesting. Chip, do you want to kind of respond to that? I'm learning. Like, I don't know, like, I'm listening. I'm like, because, you know, I can say, just before you go, I can't say that I really understood that there's this big regression. But now when I'm hearing people talk about it, I remember all these times perfectly clear. And I know that people like Triple are just doing, like, big things. He's putting out music, he's consistent. And I know there's others as well. Faith Child's still going, do you know what I mean? But yeah, when I think about it, it does seem to have died down a bit.
All right, so my opinion is, the Renaissance periods, which for UK Christian rap, as it were. So before we had people like Green Jades, Zion Noise, Jahazel, Triumph, Blessed Son, these incredible artists that had opened doors. They weren't allowed to make Christian hip hop music in the church. They were getting shunned. Yeah. And they really had to fight for that. Cool. It's now accepted. Between 2000, I'm going to make a bold statement, but I'm going to say it with my chest, because this is the case.
Say it.
Between 2006 and 2013, Christian rap ruled UK gospel music.
Absolutely.
Facts. Because
I wouldn't disagree.
When you look at why do I say that? The metrics. Number one, when you look at the mobiles between 2006 and 2013, I think 5 of those years were rappers. Yeah. and that I'm not saying that's the indication, but it spoke volumes. I will be doing. I remember a lot, and this was like up and down the show. We had Geo Lives, we had all those kind of events to the point where people were complaining that too many of these events had rappers. I would hear that complaint from industry insiders, from people that attended. It's like every event had a rapper. I was like, all right, cool. When you look at the cost of production for a rapper and how much it costs for them to put an album together, that is going to be a lot less than a singer or a choir.
Yeah.
So therefore, we're able to do a lot more with a lot less. So the reason why we were successful is because Christian rappers were putting out bodies of work. In the space of one rapper, in the space of 3 years, could put out 3 albums or 2 albums or 25 songs, whereas with a singer, a praise and worship leader, a choir, they would take 2 years to put out 1 song. So if we're able to do more, then we're going to keep the attention of the youngers a lot more. Not only that, there was a period where it was like you said, an ecosystem. So it was a culture. So there was clothing brands, there was events, it was a big massive movement. Then there were the events, there were the concerts and all this kind of stuff. So I remember because it was between 2006 and 2013. That period, it was something else altogether. Now, what happened? Why it changed? Okay, cool. So number one, there's no structure. So a lot of these artists who thought they could do it full time realized, right, this isn't going to pay my bills. I've got to find something else to do.
People got married.
So life commitments kick in, then you got to change. So that's number one. Number two, unfortunately, there were a lot of Christian rappers who fell away from the faith. So then that also played a big role into the dissemination of the scene, as it were. Now, another thing people say, oh, but the market grew up, people grew up. I don't like that excuse because number one, there will always be 16-year-olds. There will always be 16-year-olds. And then people say, okay, cool, the music didn't evolve with the times. I do agree with that to a certain extent. I think now that's not the case. And I don't think that excuse is a valid excuse because when we're looking at the kind of music that's been made over the past 2 years, you cannot tell the difference between the mainstream music and some of the music that these Christian rappers are making in terms of sonically. So I think it's there's only a small difference. Maybe in the mixing and the mastering, there might be a difference for some artists, but then even that, you have artists that are still making industry standard kind of like. And this isn't going across the board. I know there's in every genre there are going to be the Premier League. There's always going to be Premier League and Conference in every genre. There's always going to be Premier League. There's always going to be Championship. There's going to be Division. Now go for it.
Jump in.
No, go on, man. I think Matt was going to say something. Go ahead.
Would you make a comparison? You said that there's not much difference. So would you make a comparison?
Yeah, I would say the for lack of a better term, the top tier artists. There's little to no difference between them and some of the mainstream artists who are doing what they're doing, and their mainstream counterparts. So if you're looking at someone like a Faith Chuck,
I disagree.
You just
I'm
talk to
the educated UK gospel like rap scene. But I do follow a few, but I don't see them on par with like a mainstream artist. And to be fair, like I can't really compare it because they've got like those mainstream artists in the industry. They've got so much like backing from like labels.
I'm talking about the music.
Yeah, we're talking about the music now.
I'd say Melvillous for me.
I'm talking about music as well.
So what are we talking about? Are we talking about the mixing and engineering? Are we talking about the lyrics? Are we talking about production?
I'm talking about the artistry, like in the whole.
Cool.
You know what I mean? Music, the way they're putting out music, I'm saying obviously it's not fair to make that comparison.
Yeah.
Because so much backing from those things.
Facts.
You know what I mean? I'm not talking about how they look. Like,
Yeah.
Talking about music. I'm asking you to give me a comparison.
Yeah. I can do that.
It's artist, a gospel UK rap artist. I'm just asking.
Yeah. No, it's a good question because you have people like Governor. Governor is the premier one that everyone goes to. All right, cool, fair enough. The quality and the excellence in which he produces that can't be is undeniable. Same thing with Faith Charles. Then you have Esso. This guy is doing 1 million streams like a month, casually, calm. He's based in the States, but he's from the UK. Then you have artists like Jay Vessel, like A-Star. These individuals who have been making music for well over 10 years and are still doing this thing. That's just in terms of longevity. If we're talking lyrically, you've got artists like Melvillous. Melvillous can go back to back with any mainstream artist, casually, calm.
Isn't this I hear what you're saying, and I think there's a point there. I think skill-wise, I would agree with you that there are artists in the UK gospel that are on par with these guys. But I don't think I'm talking about the lyrical skill, because you take, like, someone would argue that Kendrick Lamar is better lyrically skilled than Drake, but it's the sound, the actual records, the music they're putting out.
That's why
I think that's a bit of a different conversation from how skilled.
So it depends. What's the yardstick we're looking at?
And I think it does depend upon who's the audience you're trying to go for.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
Absolutely.
and I think that's something that people really need to take into consideration. For me, when Green Jay came to an end, I stepped out of gospel specifically to go back into the mainstream, because I wanted to be in a position to go, okay, I want to see, if I wasn't in church and around all of these people, who would the scene know of?
Embrace,
And who would they embrace? So someone like Nick Brewer, who had a top 5 hit with Talk to Me, who's Governor B's best friend, is a Christian from Day, but doesn't work in the gospel realm, actually had an opportunity and was signed to Ireland. It didn't work out necessarily for him, but I know that there's a number of other artists like Drea, for example, who's a female artist from Wales, used to be known as Unknown MC or Unknown Disciple. She's doing streams, she's doing bits, but she isn't part of the Christian hip hop fraternity in that sense. But there are Christian artists out there who are, well, to some extent, Stormzy's the biggest Christian artist in the UK. Do you know what I mean?
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far.
From a point of view of where I was coming from, as in when everybody wanted to be, I stood in Brixton Academy and watched people sing the words to Shut Up and then sing the words to Blinded by Your Grace, right? And I saw that from my own eyes, right? And that challenged my thinking of, are we looking to build a scene, or are we looking to infiltrate and make a difference? And I come from a place, and I'm gonna speak for myself. Hold on. I just finished my point.
Let me land.
I come from a place where our specific purpose was to infiltrate and disrupt. That's what we were about. So that may not have been for everybody else, but when I saw that was what I was trying to achieve when we did the Fridge, which is now the Electric, in Brixton in 2001, and ran that out with 1,000 people, and no other Christian artist, no other UK rap artist had an event of that size at that time. So it's there, but it depends on how you view it.
Yeah. Go on, Matty.
No, I was gonna say when I normally say that the whole school's in UK, people say that greatest, it's great to hear.
Okay, him agree. Yeah. It's
Also, kind of going back to what Brian said about kind of like the age group, kind of like growing up. I don't actually think that's a cop out. I don't think it's an excuse. If you look at even like the mainstream, it's like, well, let's look at like N-Dubs and like the Saturdays. Those about S Club 7 and like those fans, them times they've grown up. Yeah, they're not necessarily gonna be listening to S Club 7 or Joe's Aloud or S Club 7 or N Dubs. So when like people like the T3M thing, I wasn't necessarily around in it. Jesse used to play for them, and I used to like maybe like watch things on Facebook. If you guys was to put out an event now, or if they was to come back. I don't necessarily think those crowds of people will go to that event, because they most of people got like, they most have to like sort out childcare and stuff.
Can I interject here?
They most probably have to sort out like childcare and whatever like sort out their kids and stuff. Yeah, so most of people wouldn't go to those events. But what I was going to say is those the next gen of rap, have they come up and kind of like taken
the back,
have
laid the foundation. Yeah.
Laid the foundation, and if they haven't, how comes? And number two, I don't know. Like I feel like I'm at a touch, so I can't really like necessarily speak on it. But the questions I'm asked, I'm just basically asking questions.
No, no,
Just so
I think I understand your question. Like, so when it became evident to us that Green Jay was probably coming to an end, we specifically went out of our way to try and educate those others around us around what we'd learned. We put on these events called Ground Level. We held one at Governor's Church. We had one at the Jam in Brixton, where we were trying to educate our scene of the things that we had learned. Because the whole thing you're saying about Governor going into the CCM, that's exactly what we did 8 years before, when we realized that we'd done everything that there was to do in gospel, and that now we needed to go and do Soul Survivor and Spring Harvest and, do you know what I mean? What else was there? Oh, God, New Wine.
Yeah,
and,
New
do you know
Wine,
what I mean?
yeah,
All of them
yeah.
gigs, where at the time, let's be real, no black people were there. Like, we weren't even invited. I remember going to Spring Harvest the first time, Noel Robinson seeing me and going, "Rah, they let you lot in." Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, "Rah."
Everyone's.
So I remember them days, right? And, you know, all of that happened, but then you've still got the situation, even there in the CCM, those events have ended. There's no more Soul Survivor. There's, you know, 29th Chapter came on and very much took over what we'd established at Soul Survivor.
remember 29th Chapter.
And they did that for years and ran that tent. But then when they came to an end, there were, you know, I think Governor took over then, and then eventually Soul Survivor closed down. So even in the CCM, there stopped being places where you could actually go and perform. And I also think there's a very important difference between now and then. When I grew up, and I know Ace is going to say the same thing, when we were younger, right, we weren't allowed to listen to secular music, right? It was not promoted at all that it should be something that we're involved in. Now, things have changed entirely. And it is no longer a case where people are growing up in households where there's no secular music. So therefore, it means that you are no longer competing with Raymond and Co. You are competing with Drake.
Yeah, jeez.
It's from the door, not even, you know, there is nothing else.
This is a great point. That's a great point. That's a great point.
So, I want to divert ever so slightly, because what I'm picking up is that, and I didn't realize I was going to learn so much. It seems like like with anything, you've got your people that are continuing going, like I said, but we seem to keep coming back to this question and this discussion about sustainability and about how does a gospel artist sustain themselves? And we all seem to point to the church. And then the church seems to do that. Because even you guys that built an ecosystem, any smart investor would be like, there's something going on here. But even your ecosystem died out. I'm not quite understanding what is going on. Why?
I don't actually think that the church, this might offend some people, so let me change my approach.
It's going to back up now. Go for it,
Nah,
man.
say it as it is, right?
Say it up, man.
Say it with your chest, man. You say it with your chest.
That's right.
I think this is not all Christian hip hop artists are ones that are not necessarily praise and worship leaders, but I think a lot of those guys, a lot of them grew up in the church. A lot of them didn't grow up in the church, and so they became Christian, and they were already in that, and just kind of switched, and you know, they became Christian. That's all they wanted to rap about. That was it. That was all that. I'm not sure that switch, that very zealous switch, was always necessary. I think that having rappers that were Christian, that were speaking about real life issues, as opposed to like being so explicitly trying to I guess fit into like a gospel space that maybe wasn't really ready or didn't really necessarily want that. And I'll give you an example. Like, I remember in 2012, I went to the Stellars, and they had a huge hip hop performance. It was The Cray, it was The Truth, it was, I think, Flame. I can't remember who else was there. And the following year, what happened after that show, they got a bunch of complaints Central City Productions, who produces us, got a bunch of complaints saying we don't want to see this. But the Stellar's audience, they're traditional churchgoers. They're not into all that hip hop stuff. And so from that moment onwards, they actually took out the hip hop section. I think they had it once or twice after that. But generally speaking, if you watch the Stellar's now, they don't include hip hop for that very reason. Their audience just don't want to see it. So I wonder if they've been looking for an audience in the church that might not be there. Perhaps, you know, they're outside of the church, or maybe the content just needs to be. And if you look at artists like Lecrae, I think one of the ones that realised that, because he started off, if you look at Lecrae's content from 10 years ago versus now, it's changed a lot. He was very much heavy Jesus and heavy gospel, and now he's shifted to like working with John Legend and doing stuff like records and trap artists.
I disagree.
Because he's realised, actually, you know what? The church might not be where like I should be focusing my energy on, but if I want to reach those outsiders, I want to probably have to, you know,
pivot.
Makes sense. So,
Triple, do you want to respond?
I strongly disagree with that. So, when you're trying to lose weight, you need to have a balanced diet. I can't say, oh yeah, do you know what? All I'm going to eat is protein. All I'm going to eat is vegetables. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Everyone, when the Bible, even in the Bible, it talks about like we are the body, and every part of the body has its own function.
Yeah.
So if every man is trying to do, let me talk about life, let me reach the road, man, you're gonna have a bunch of Christians who don't want to hear that. So of recent, there's been this uprising of gospel drill, and they're nowhere near explicitly, you know, talking Jesus. They're trying to reach roadman. So if every Christian artist or Christian rapper is now making music to reach the world, you're gonna have people who don't even want to hear that, who can't connect to that, who can't relate to it. They're gonna be in the church and be like, what's there for us? Because there are Christians who are in the faith and want to mature and just want to hear about Jesus. Does that mean that every rapper needs to make that? No. Does that mean every rapper needs to make that? No. I believe, like, know your calling, know your purpose, know your position, and play your position. If you're a goalkeeper, you're a goalkeeper. If you're a midfielder, you're a midfielder. Not everybody can be a striker. Not everyone can be Governor B. Not everyone can be a number 9. Some people have to be a left back.
Yeah.
Someone's
I play left back. What's wrong with left back?
Nothing wrong.
I'm playing.
Why does it have to be preaching heavy gospel or reaching roadman? I don't think you have to be heavily on either side. I think that's
down to the artist.
A bunch of us listen to Stormzy, right? Stormzy's not just for the roadman. He's not just for the I'm not necessarily saying that you have to be heavily on either side. I mean, a lot of us listen to Drake. Drake's not just for the roadman. Drake's for the man that wants to go take his girl on a date as well. Drake's for the guy that wants to like turn up in the
I hear that, but not everyone's that.
You have to like be heavily on one side or heavily on the other. But I think a lot of the gospel rappers they were heavy on that one side. And so if you want to talk about playing teams, we didn't have a lot of people that were doing that. They were all kind of like, you know, preaching heavy gospel, and eventually they realized, okay, we might have to evolve.
You're right.
I think. Do you mind if I jump in? I've always seen it as there's two sides of the coin, and I joined the GMIA as a director specifically because I wanted to represent the other side of the coin. I feel that there is a side of gospel music which is supposed to be for the kingdom. Right? Specifically, it's supposed to edify the body. It is supposed to uplift. It is supposed to empower. It is supposed to involve the body of Christ. Specifically, that is one side of the coin. Right? The other side of the coin is there is a side that is to uplift and educate, inspire those who are not of faith. Right? Now, the issue is this, and this is a similar issue that you have for Christian musicians who play with secular artists, right? All the faith and the support is on the church side. None of the money is. All of the money is on the secular side, but none of the support is. So if you are, say, for example, a drummer who's about to go on tour with Jessie J, right? Your church might pray for you. If you're a drummer who's about to go on tour with Jessie J, or you're another person in the congregation who's about to go to university, your church is probably more likely to pray for you going to university than if you're going on tour with Jessie J, right? And that's what happened to a whole heap of our musicians. We're like, they just left us, bro. And that's how a lot of the Christian artists felt. The reality was, what we were trying to do is be true to the audience that God had called us to. So, as I said, Green Jade was a gang in Clapham, right? We carried weapons, some of us sold drugs, some of us were into all sorts of other things. We had a move of God in our lives that brought 14 out of 25 of us to Christ. Now, Our thing was always to go back to the kids who were like us, smoking weed on a Friday night, listening to Tim Westwood and watching Kung Fu films, because that's who we were. We went through our first album, is more Christian if you listen to Chronicles, but then things start to develop more into talking about the issues that were important to us. And when Green Jade found our lane was Guns Down. Our lane was it was a song that we made that went into schools that spoke to young people around the issues of gun crime, which we did for 5 years, saw 20,000 kids, and was the only thing we got paid for, really, right? Through doing that, we worked with Boris Johnson when he was mayor. We were officially we got Song of the Week on Choice. We were Choice's official Peace in the Streets ambassadors to go into schools. And as Christians, we found a place where our passion for life and the empowering of people was appreciated and supported until we got nominated for a gospel MOBO. And we said, because of the work that we're doing, as we'd just done a school in, I think it was Tower Hamlets, where I think there were 100 kids in the room, 99 of them were Bangladeshi and one was a black kid. Everybody was Muslim. We didn't want the schools to believe that we were there trying to evangelize their children, because we weren't. We were trying to deal with an issue of gun and knife crime. So as a result, we withdrew from the MOBOs and said, thank you very much. Please give all of our votes to Jahazel, because he is a gospel rapper. He was a member of Green Jade, and we'd be happy for him to take anything that was coming to us. That caused a whole heap of madness.
Really, yeah.
Because all of a sudden, Green Jade aren't proud of their faith. We don't, and you know, there was an article written by Marcia Dixon that blew up the whole thing, where we were trying to quietly pull out. And then what happened was, all of those schools that had booked Guns Down 6 months in advance pulled out on us.
Really?
We had to change the name of Guns Down to Fighting Chance for us to continue to do that. That was the only thing that, not only were we making a difference, it was one time in my life I had a kid come up to me after a show and go, you know what you're talking about is great, but I think it's too late for me. And I was like, well, why? And he was like, well, I'm 15, my brother's been murdered, my cousin just got stabbed, and I'm wearing a bulletproof vest to school.
Wow.
And from being there, we were able to repair the breach. We were able to fulfill the Great Commission by actually supporting this young man, getting with his family. He ended up being arrested. We went and picked him up at the police station. We spoke with him. 6 weeks after we did the tour, he got stabbed in school, but survived. And because we'd put an infrastructure behind him, we had a way to help him and his family get through the trauma of not only them losing his elder brother, but him being stabbed also. And that for me was the power of Christ. That was not, no, we didn't evangelize, and no, I can't say that the family then got saved and went here. I don't know that. But I know we were put in a position by God to be that repairer of the breach. And that's what we were called to do. But our community didn't understand it. And when we said, you know what, it's more important for me to be in a school than have an award, people were like, oh no, you're not proud of your faith, you're backsliding, the group's splitting up, people don't like each other, all sorts of stuff. And that was incredibly disheartening.
I can imagine.
To see that happen from the community when we're trying to actually make a difference with what God specifically called us to do.
I have a question, Triple. You're doing it now, you're releasing music now. Who's your audience?
So for me, I'm primarily focusing on the church.
Okay.
And I'm not ashamed to say that.
Yeah.
Because I think so many rappers are so focused, especially gospel rappers, that there's a pressure on, reach the world. I most of my friends who support what I do are outside of the church. They love what I do. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Most of the people that I engage with who are not in the church, they engage with the music that I make. But for me, I'm like, I can't just assume that everyone in the church is like that and is listening to what we're doing, because there are people who are, I'm the same age, or in the same age bracket as Skepta, Wretch, Kano. Those are the oldest, do you know what I'm trying to say? So for me, I don't care what genre of music you're in, maybe mine is praise and worship, music has been and always will be a young person's game. Facts. So I'm not going to be able to interact with a 16-year-old the same way that I can interact with some of my age. And I know this because I do a lot of schools work as well. So I will go into schools and we'll talk about music, and I will mention the Wretches, the Kanos, and the Gets, and they'll be like, and they're like, nah, Lowski, Heady One, M Honcho. And so they're not even like there's a generation gap, and it's okay because that's what's gonna happen. You're gonna relate to what you know, and that's your age. So for me, I'm like, all right, cool. One of the successes behind people like your governors and your SOs, they had the multitude of the church behind them before they went into that bracket. You understand, when you're looking at mainstream arenas, they're looking at numbers.
They
don't care where the numbers come from. It could be 20,000 of your friends. All they see is the number 20,000.
I'll put a pin in that one, but I'll come
no,
back.
but let's say for example streams. You don't know who's a Christian and who's not a Christian. You're just seeing 20,000. You're just seeing 20,000 streams on this particular song. So when you know you're getting the church or like a specific number of people supporting you, you have a greater leg to stand on when you do want to go into those mainstream arenas. Because in the mainstream arena, they just care about numbers. If you know that we can put you on a platform and you can deliver numbers, then we'll give you the respect that is deserved. It's easier than just saying, oh, I'm talented, I'm gifted. So for me personally, like, do I make music that will appeal to people who are outside of church? Definitely. Will I collaborate with people who are outside of church? Yeah, definitely. Do you get what I'm trying to say? Does that stop me from feeding my core? Because a successful artist will feed the core first and then expand outwards. That's how you become successful.
I feel that. Go on, Wiz.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the issue sometimes that we have with that is it matters more than you think where the numbers have come from. So there was a situation when, you know, YouTube started blowing up and people were having loads and loads of views on their videos. But the issue was because, yes, your church is backing it and they're supporting it. If you do what a mainstream audience require, those same people possibly won't watch your video because that video is no longer made for them. So they are no longer your core audience. And that was the issue that a lot of the bigger Christian UK artists had, which, yes, I've got numbers, but those numbers don't translate. So as an example, when Green Jay came to an end, I was like, right, okay, I've done some bits in this industry, I should be all right. I went to go and get a job. And they were asking me, okay, so who did you support? And I was like, well, we opened for Delirious on a couple of times. So for those who don't know, Delirious are huge, and basically the Christian equivalent of U2, right? But the person sitting behind the desk was like, but who are Delirious? And what it was Delirious held no currency in their country. So in the Christian world, Delirious, if I say Delirious or if I say the Tribe, both of who we were connected to, in the CCM market 10 years ago, that would be a huge thing. But if you didn't know that market and didn't know those people, that wasn't a name that anyone was particularly looking for. So it does matter where you've built your audience base, because now, as I say, it's less about the sales. It's more about, will I Saw It First clothing company back you because the kind of people who are engaging with you would buy their clothing? That's what they're looking at. They're looking at, okay, cool, would this vodka drink support your tour? Because that's where the money is coming from. The money isn't coming from people buying stuff because there's no CDs to buy anymore. The money is coming from, what's your corporate, okay, who is your audience base? What are the things that they're likely to wear? What are the things that they're likely to buy? How can you influence the audience that you have to purchase our product or be aware of our product because our product is endorsing you? That's the new business model within artistry and within music. So therefore, growing that audience, cultivating that audience and having the engagement. Trust me, some of these companies will look in your Instagram and go through your engagement and see what's the split? Is it male, female? What's the demographic? Where are they? All of those kind of things. So it is about developing that now, very much so.
Okay, I have a question before I come to you, Joseph. You're the same as me. I'm just listening. I'm just
being educated.
Exactly. But I want to ask: are Christian rappers respected by mainstream rappers?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's the ones that they have personal relationship with and the ones that they know are good at what they do. Plethora of examples. So for example, for me personally, I went to school in East London. I went to I went to a school in East London called St. Bonaventures, and I was classmates. I went to St. Bon's. So I was classmates with Tinchy Strider. So I remember a couple of years after we left school and everything, at the Mobos, when he saw me there, he was like, "Yo, Triple, what's really good?" how are you doing? I've been seeing your stuff around. This is amazing. And then some of the interaction with some of the other mainstream artists I've had over the past couple of years has always been really positive.
Yeah.
When you look at someone like A-Star, who recently collaborated with DWE on his album, Governor with Wretch 32 on his album, you know, and the relationships that other artists have behind closed doors that we won't see.
know.
Because it's one of those things where I remember Lecrae, he said, oh yeah, I've had conversations with Kanye and Kendrick, but he would only mention those in passing years after those things have happened. So there are so many relationships that are behind closed doors, and out of respect for those artists, you don't want to make noise about it. You know, so I think on a personal note, for a few artists, there is a level of respect that maybe the wider audience are unaware of, and may not be seen because they're not tweeting about it, or they're not hashtagging it, or they're not putting it on the socials. But it's there. They're aware. I've had a lot of, especially artists who aren't huge in the mainstream. This has happened to me 3 or 4 times where somebody, R&B singers or hip hop artists in the mainstream, they will come up to him and be like, oh, because they grew up in the church.
Yeah.
So they will come up to him and be like, I grew up in your music, you know. I used to listen to you when I was younger. And I'm like, but you're doing this now. So that's, for me, that's like, okay, cool. Not only do you know what we do, but you respect what we do. And for me, that speaks volumes.
Yeah,
So-
I definitely agree. I think it's about relationships. I think for us, we were in the scene, so we knew people on the scene. Like I say, Black Twang was a friend. Ty, who, you know, rest his soul, you know, actually when our studio got robbed, Ty introduced us to his studio owner to help us mix and master the album. So like we had interactions with these guys because we were doing the same kind. We were at the beginning anyway. We were doing the same shows with them. They saw us around the scene. They knew our names, and because we were good, we got that respect. We did have to fight for it in certain circumstances. I mean, with there was on Choice FM. There used to be a rap show run by 279. Friday Night Rap Show, and he had said at some point he would never play Christian music on his station. So he then had this. So we tried to get stuff to him, and he wouldn't play it. But then he had this competition called 60 Seconds of Fame, where you had to ring up, and 2 MCs would have to do a rap, and the best person won, and went over to the next week. If you did 4 weeks in a row, you got to go on the show. So I went on it, and I smashed it, and I won 4 weeks in a row. Brought the whole of Green Jade on the show, and then sort of about 3 or 4 other members of Zion Noise did the same thing. And by that point, it was like, look, you lot are dope. I can't get away from the fact.
So
you are good.
279 was trying to say you guys are dead out. I'm not playing it.
And he wouldn't give it a chance because of what his perception was. But when we actually delivered what it was,
mad to me.
he was like, 2-7's a friend of mine now. Do you know what I mean? He's also a Liverpool supporter, which helps. But like, you know, never walking alone and stuff. But like, you know, it was now we're cool. I see him regularly at things like Breaking Convention, and the respect that they show is always because you lot were real. You were serious.
It's interesting to me because I've always viewed like the hip hop scene or the rap scene or whatever as the one scene that wouldn't suffer from some of the stuff that we may suffer from in like more I don't want to say more musical, but like more like singing, playing, whereby when you're having to mix and master like live drums and keyboards and get the choir on top of the band and get it sounding a certain way, I've always seen the hip hop scene as being able to get closest to the mainstream, probably because a lot of it is computer music. You see what I mean? So it's kind of easier to mold in that way. Obviously it takes skill like everything else, but I've always seen it as something that is, you guys have been the closest to your mainstream counterparts, if that makes sense. So I'm surprised to hear that was the perception that you guys are just dead. It must just be then because they didn't like the lyrical content. Maybe it was triggering, I don't know.
I think as well, like, I know, as I said, I didn't grow up in church. I come from a hip hop background. And when I thought of God Christian rap, MC Hammer had this track called Pray. That's why we pray, just to make it today. And that was what I had in my head as a Christian MC sometimes. So I was always going forth in the mindset of that there is, if I had that perception, other people are going to have that perception.
And they still do.
And they still do. So it means I have to burst you. I got to show you that,
Interesting.
that ain't what we do.
Pray with my jam.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? I like that tune. I did. Do you know what I mean? In the purple robes and stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Terrible. All right, so because we're going to wrap up very shortly, but I have a question. How can the situation improve? What is gonna bring us back to that time where we all spoke of around the time where it was about what 2010? You know what's mad though? Around that 2010 time was when the mainstream hip hop thing was blowing up like it is now.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's a correlation because that's when Tiny, Wretch, Devlin, Pro Green, all of that. That's when that whole movement was going as well. And it wasn't just on the Christian gospel side. We were like the only ones playing live on like the Brit Awards.
Yeah.
And them kind of thing there. Do you know what I mean? Like and winning those kind of awards and doing all that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering if it's not just to do with Christianity, it's to do with culture in the UK generally and just the peaks and the troughs and the waves of music. But it's mad to me that we've done other episodes and we're all just at the same place where there's this lack of support or infrastructure where it's like,
Can I give my opinion?
yeah,
on
like
it? As I
what
said,
can we
like,
do?
So, firstly, you would, as I said, I spoke about that coin where there's those who are towards the minister towards the body and those who are ministering outwards. I think if you're ministering towards the body, the church should be supporting you in some way, right? Financially, I think, because in that, because I think an issue for a lot of churches is, how does that bring in a congregation to me? You know, whether people admit it or not, I think that is the underlying thing. How does that bring parishioners in for me? I know how praise and worship does, because I know people come in, oh, I heard the music and I thought I'd stop by and I'd stay. And I know how that works. How does Triple O bring people into me? Beyond, let's put him on the youth section. Do you know what I mean? Right? There's that question.
Yeah.
And I find, you know, you get the odd pastor who kind of gets it and gets into it. I think there's that side of it. And also looking at ways to, and it's also important what Triple said, right? This hasn't been his main source of income. And I think if artists go from the understanding of, right, my calling is to the body, cool, I might need a day job. That doesn't mean that stops me from having the ministry that I have or doing the things that I have, or it doesn't mean that I shouldn't do things with quality or with excellence. It might just mean that it only happens after 6 o'clock when I clock off from work, and that is the decision I am financially making for my life, right? I am probably not going to be Fred Hammond rich out here, right? If you can accept that in the UK, I think you're in a fine position, because then you continue to do what you're doing, you continue to serve the body, and you continue to do that. If you want to make money, and be honest, because I did. I wanted to pay off my mortgage with my thing. I did, right? And I wasn't always as honest with myself about that was what I wanted, right? If that's what you want, you need to be able to attract the largest possible audience. Simple and plain. Largest possible audience that you can for the talent that you have. And you have to make decisions about who is that going to be. And once you've made that decision, you're going to need to stick with it. And I think that and realize that there are certain decisions and certain consequences that come with each one of those decisions. But if that's where you believe you should be, and that's what you should be doing, that's the thing that you need to pursue. And what would be nice is if we do get somebody who flies off and does that they have a willingness to come back to the body and help others coming behind them. That's the thing that's the issue. We did have some huge groups in the 80s who did nothing for nobody coming behind them. Right? That was why in the 90s we started again. Right? The reason why I went into working at Tile Yard was because I wanted to be in the industry so I could open the doors. Because there's no point continually knocking unless there's someone there who's going to support you. And now we have got more of us, and definitely more people who've come from Christian backgrounds working in the industry. Like, you know, the twins, Alec and Alex Botang, have just become the head of Def Jam 207. Church boys that I grew up with. And our community is in there trying to make a difference. Alec is a person who supported Stormzy. So, therefore, we've got to know these things. We've got to be willing to pass the information on and know that there are routes forward, but also be very, very clear about the money side of it. Because if it's about you becoming famous, then you need to do X, Y, and Z. If you want to tell a story and minister, that's cool. You might need to continue working at the post office and know that that is there to pay your mortgage, and it's cool. God ain't got a problem with the fact that you ain't full time, as long as you're willing to put in what it is that you've got.
I hear that. I'm gonna give you the last word, bro. Yeah, it's just gonna say how, like, what would help you as a rapper doing your thing?
It's such a big question. I would say like a better infrastructure in our scene, period. Unfortunately, everybody wants to be on stage and we don't have any A&Rs. We don't have good managers. We don't have individuals who want to play the back end, and understandably so, because that's a lot of work for very little, money. So if the moment that there's some form of infrastructure in place that can help support the building of an ecosystem, then that will go a way to actually developing, those kind of artists. Personally, it will be great if this genre of music was accepted more so by the rest of UK gospel music. I don't think it is. For whatever reason, I don't know. But it is what it is. And until that changes as well, I think that would definitely make an impact on who's doing what and where's doing. Because I've always, one thing I've seen is a lot of Christian rappers, especially in the UK or in general, they just go where they're accepted and not where they're tolerated, which is the way it should be. So it's like, okay, cool. If this church platform and this festival won't take me, we're going to create our own. We're going to just do our own and do our. That's why that ecosystem was built, because some of the other churches and organizations and people, they weren't accepting or as welcoming to this genre as they potentially could have been. So I think that's something that could definitely help. And this is the thing, I don't like blaming the audience or the consumers or the industry people. I think as artists ourselves, we need to take responsibility and improve the quality of the music that we're producing. The reason why I've been on the defensive, as it were, is because I think this is a great opportunity for this genre of music to speak up. But is everything perfect? No. Are people scrambling for Christian hip hop in the UK? No. Is the quality like amazing to the point where it's doing thousands and thousands of units per week? No, like there's still going to be individuals, like I said, Premier League, Championship, Conference, and there's a big gap between some of these artists. But I do believe that once artists kind of take the time to invest in their craft, work with the right people, and slow down in terms of not being in a hurry to put out an album, the money that you would have used to put into an album, put it into a single, and improve the quality, get some marketing, get some PR behind it. If artists can take the time to invest in themselves better, slowly we'll see an increase in quality. So these are the kind of things I think will definitely change the scene.
And just to come off the back of the investing into yourself,
30 seconds,
it's not all just about making the CD. There's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes that people don't understand, like Google adverts, which boost the amount of views that you have, or Spotify playlisting that boosts the amount of saves and of plays that you have. So you've got to engage in understanding the business also, because it can't just be the music.
Definitely. I think on that note, we're going to call it. I think, as you can see from my face, this has been a big education, man. And I've really enjoyed having you guys here, kind of shedding the light, because we'd be remiss to have this conversation about a UK gospel scene and wanting to help turn it into an industry, and how does that work? What does it look like? What have we been through? What have we been like? What has happened in the past? And not talk about this. And I'm so glad we did, because I didn't realize a lot of this was happening. I didn't realize it was the state of play. I didn't realize that even you guys, who I saw as like the pioneers of just doing it yourself, has suffered a big regression in that way. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I feel like it seems to all be boiling down to the same thing: infrastructure. And essentially, if no one's going to do it for you, you've got to do it yourself. And like I said in the other episode, I'm realizing now, man, that great things happen when you're betting yourself. So I think it's just got to start there for all of us, essentially.
Yeah.
And on that note, yo, hit up the Top Entertainment YouTube, subscribe, like, share. Let us know what you think in the comments. I don't know, are you a rapper? Do you have an opinion on what we're talking about? Let us know, and let's keep the conversation going. Check out all the past episodes, season 1 as well, and episodes to come. Thanks, guys, for being with us. Shout out to the peeps on Zoom. Nice one to my panel.
You didn't talk. we just sat here as sponges, man.
Completely.
Yeah.
Soaked it in, yeah.
And I think that speaks volumes in itself, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, peace, and we out. You audience.